If you're still waiting for a sign, here's another one. At California Psychics, we reject 98% of the psychics who apply to work for us. So we only connect you with the best. That's how we can guarantee if your reading isn't life-changing, it's free. And right now, new customers receive 20 minutes for just $20. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. Dramatic sound effect incoming. Experience the joy of certainty at CaliforniaPsychics.com.
So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. I want you to know, I know that your time is precious and that a lot of time your energy, like most of us, might feel like it's in short supply. So if you are dedicating any time to be with me today or tonight or whenever you listen, I want you to know I don't take that lightly and I appreciate you, truly. So I've tried to record this episode multiple times. This might be take 5 or 6. So, but as I get into it, you'll kind of get a sense why. And it's because there's so much going on right now. What I want to talk about is a few external things that can help us contextualize the mass distress and discord and distrust and division that really characterizes this time period. And I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. But some of the external philosophical or other ways of looking at these things in a context that helps us to understand and move through them or endure, weather the storms. And also some questions for reflection so that we can ourselves do the work inside to help us not only weather the storm, but keep growing, keep developing, keep learning, keep flourishing, right? And be more of the people we ideally want to be, even when things are difficult. And that's a hard thing to do. It'll make more sense as I go on with the podcast. Also, I'm just going to say ahead of time, Sabrina, my smallest cat, who was born actually in my office while I was working a few years ago, has a little pink bell on. So as she moves in and out of my studio, you will possibly hear her little pink bell, but she's super cute. So hopefully that'll be a nice image. But anyway, I guess if I start at a broader level, a way of thinking about, it's not the only way, it's just a way of thinking about what is going on in our world, again, in our small, close personal relationships, extended family relationships, in our cities and towns, our country, globally. What's the strife, division, discord, all of that. One framework for thinking about what's going on that is external to us would be astrology. Now, I'm not an astrologer, but I have found value in it. And in fact, next week, I'm going to have Leslie McGurk on again to talk about what's going on now. Because what I understand from listening to Leslie and a bunch of other astrologers like Pam Gregory and Lisa Salvatore, both of whom have huge followings and for good reason, they're excellent. You should check them out. But is that what is going on now in the collective, meaning affecting all of us? We're all feeling it in some way and we're feeling it for a reason. So if we're going to go really macro, really broad, what I've heard several astrologers say is that this is a time that those of us who are here have chosen, our souls have chosen to be here. Sometimes that's really hard to imagine because it is a time of profound change, an important change, but it is profoundly uncomfortable. And for many people, that does not remotely do it justice. But it's a time when the collective is experiencing profound changes inside of us, each one of us, in our relationships, again, nationally, globally. And my understanding from what I've heard, and again, Leslie McGurk will clarify next week when she's on the show more about what's going on here, but that karmic lessons are coming to the surface and are playing out again, on on multiple levels in our society. So lessons related to responsibility. How are we responsible? For whom are we responsible? Are we responsible for our own actions, our own choices, our own beliefs, and so forth? Karmic lessons related to soul growth, right? Why are we here? What is it that we want to do? What is our goal for this lifetime here? And it's also a time of important truths coming to light. Again, we're seeing this play out on the larger stage. Now, before I go further with that, I want to just acknowledge growth is hard. Most people would, I think, acknowledge that the easy times in our lives are wonderful, but there are time to regroup and restore and recalibrate. The growth comes from the painful stuff, the hard stuff, right? We work towards something and it gives it a different meaning, and we change and evolve along the way, right? Whether it's at your job or at school or with a life change you're trying to make and so forth. But it's hard. Profound growth, I think, requires looking at ourselves and our relationships and our values. I feel like the term values is kind of a little bit loaded because it's unfortunately entangled with, I think, a lot of political rhetoric that can be very toxic and not even necessarily very true. But values, what is important to us? What do we hold dear? What kind of people do we want to be? Who inspires us, right? Our values. So profound growth means we have to keep growing. We have to keep looking at ourselves, and hard things make us do that in a way that easy times don't. I also think it means re-examining the faith we have put into not only personal relationships, but our relationships, that we have in terms of our intellectual ideas about public figures or our feelings about public figures. Who do we respect and why? Who do we trust and why? Right? Our institutions. What do we value? And how do we know? So those are some questions that we'll get into on the more personal level in a little bit. But nowadays, I feel like it is, and it's been this way for a while, it can be so hard to separate the wheat from the proverbial chaff, right? In terms of the information we see. So how do we know what is real and what isn't? And I think what's happened is there's been such an entanglement of identity with political parties. And I get why. To some extent, we might say this or that represents more of how I feel I am. Okay. And by the way, I'm going to keep this as politically neutral as I can. I'm not a politically neutral person by any means. I'm not. But it's not a part of my identity. And I just want to make that clear. And as we talk more about values, you'll see what I mean, because I think public figures need to earn our trust, and they need to keep earning it, right? If we are placing any part of our well-being in a public figure, they need to earn that, and they need to keep earning that. That's my opinion. But it helps if we know who we are and who we want to be. But there's so much disinformation on social media and even in the regular news media, right? Things are different than they used to be. And in fact, legally, it used to be that decades ago, that you couldn't be a news organization and say something that wasn't true. That's not true anymore. That rule was changed quite a while ago. And again, you can Google that. I'm trying to stay as neutral as I can because I want this podcast to be useful for everybody. And it may or may not, but there are massive and incredibly well-funded efforts to spread information to influence people's opinions. And they don't have to be true. In fact, they could be presented as fact or news, and it's not necessarily. And it often isn't. I want to just clarify again, I've done this previously, but misinformation is believing something is true and repeating it, and it's not true. But now usually it spreads quite rapidly in the social media era. Disinformation is, it's a lie. It's a lie. And you say it because you want to achieve a certain goal with that information. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And the misinformation and the disinformation make it very hard to know sometimes what is true, right? And it's crazy making. It's crazy making inside of us, right? Because as a species, we like certainty. We like knowing what's what. We like being able to believe the people we've put faith in. But it also makes it hard to make good decisions. And it has strained the population at large so greatly because there's been such heavy disinformation campaigns. And a way, I think, to handle the stress of that and cut through a lot of the noise that's deliberately put out there to distract, to create chaos, is to know who we are. So to me, that means, again, knowing what we value. So we're here in a time that, again, very difficult. That is a gross understatement. We are strained on multiple levels. I'm not sure, I don't even know if we've seen the bulk of it, but how do we navigate what's important? So one way to get clearer on who we are, right, and what we value is to think about the people either in our immediate sphere or on the larger stage, the world stage, or even characters in literature or in a movie. Who inspires us? So that would be the first question, actually, because if we can pinpoint someone who inspires us and take a look at the why, we get a clearer sense of who we are and what we're personally striving for. Once we know that, it's somewhat easier. It's not easy, but to see through the BS of the world or the BS that's being thrown at us all the time, right? Because we can say, is this message in its entirety aligned with the values, the core values I hold dear? And I mean, taking the labels off of it, taking political labels, cultural labels, other labels off of it. Who do we want to be? So if I think about people who inspire me, and I was asked to think about this recently, and I thought, okay, this is a really good exercise. I want to just tell you a little anecdote. I had lunch recently with one of my former professors. She was a professor of mine when I was a doctoral student. This is a person who's a psychologist and, a former researcher and clinician and an incredibly beautiful soul. So the academic achievements and the professional achievements are wonderful and they're part of her. That's not why I respect and value her so much. I'm going to say who it is. I don't know if she'll listen to this episode or not, but her name is Ronnie Beth Tower. Some of the people who went to school at the same time I did will know who I'm talking about. But Ronnie is somebody who represents what I value and holding those values in mind, who I would like to be more of and myself. And we should always be wanting to grow and develop throughout our entire lifespan. So I had lunch with Ronnie the other day. I went to meet her and we had a lovely lunch together. But if I had to say, what is it I respect about Ronnie? I enjoy her intelligence. She's got such a bright kind of intellect and she's so thoughtful about things and she thinks about the bigger questions and she does the work. She's always been intellectually curious, but it goes deeper than that. Those are things I like and enjoy about her. But the things I most value about her is that being a good person really matters to her. And doing the work to achieve the goals she has in mind for herself also really important to her. So at one point, Ronnie was a single mother of 2 children. And She had always had a serious intellectual curiosity. She put herself through her own doctoral program at Yale at a time when not many women achieved that level of education. So she took care of her kids and worked during the day. I don't know how she did this for so many years. And when her kids went to bed after dinner is when she started working on her papers. So she'd be up half the night writing her papers and then get up at like 5 a.m. to continue doing so, and then take care of her kids and get them off to school and then do her own work. And she never complained about it. She said, this is what I want to do. And it was hard for years. But I so respect that she knew it was important to her and worked toward that goal and made the sacrifices she needed to without financial or other help from other people. But that's not even the bulk of why I respect her so much. She's just a good, kind, thoughtful person. If you need help with something, she will make the time for you. And yet she has healthy interpersonal boundaries with people, right? So she's not making herself a martyr to do it. And so she's able to model how you can both be a good friend and a wonderful mentor and be available without sacrificing herself unnecessarily in the process. At 81, she's still learning because she knows that, again, we're supposed to be growing our entire lives in some way. She's been a loving wife. She's a loving mom and grandparent. She is a good friend to her friends. She is an important member of her community at large. And Ronnie has found a way to both do things she loves and be of service. So I really value her. She has a strong sense of her own values. She is an ethical person. So I know what it is about her that inspires me. She also always just happens to look really lovely and put together. and I'm kind of in awe of that, especially since half the time you'll see me, I might be pre-shower walking my dog and trying to get my work done. She seems to do it with ease. But if I can identify somebody, this is why I'm asking you to think about who inspires you. Because if we can find that person and identify that we feel good in their presence, we feel they're trustworthy, we feel they're honest, we feel they're compassionate, or whatever it is we value about them. Those are some of the things I value. We have a clearer sense then of who we ourselves would ideally like to be, right? And then we can have a clearer sense of what it is we want to work toward and what that might look like. That's so different from celebrity worship, where somebody might be, on Instagram and they always look great, or they're making a ton of cash, or they are always perfectly coiffed or whatever. And it's not wrong. None of those things are wrong. But I kind of think for us to really admire and aspire to be more or embody more of the qualities somebody has, we want it to be deeper than that. Because I think we're here for a deeper purpose. And again, if we know what that is, when we see something that doesn't quite sit right, we have a clearer sense of why. So I guess the second question I would have would be, if we know what it is we value, we have someone who can inspire us, we have a sense of what it is we value about them, and we have a sense of what we would like to be more of or strive toward, I think it's inevitable that we think, how do they treat other people, right? And we're in a world where it's really hard to treat everybody equally and everybody well. I mean, there are people who just rub us the wrong way. I'm just saying, like, even just in a mundane, you're going to walk down your street, and if you pass 10 neighbors, you're not probably going to like them all equally, and that's okay. And your good morning might be very different to one of them than another in terms of how much you want to stand and chat with them, or whether it's a kind of a curt, I got to do this to be polite, but not my favorite person, to someone that you think is nice, but you know that the relationship isn't likely to go deeper. Maybe there's not a ton you have in common to the people that you feel a deep resonance with. But when I say, to whom do my values extend? When I ask myself that question, the important thing is it everyone? Or is it only people like me? Right? And only each one of us can answer that for ourselves. But I'm asking that because, again, in this day and age, there's such a push to devalue. That's an interesting word, right? To devalue or disrespect or marginalize other people, or a sense that it's not okay to do this to certain people, but to other people, it's okay to be this way. And it's not a very nice way, or worse. Our values tell us and inform us and hopefully shape how we move forward. And listen, nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. And I want to just say that how we are at any given moment is a dynamic thing. It is not static. So we are different when someone cuts us off in traffic, probably, than we are when we are having lunch with somebody we really enjoy and that we feel is on the same page and that we respect and we want to respect us. I'm going to take a quick break because, I have to do that at about this point in the show. But when I come back, we'll talk a little bit more about how we know who we are and who we ultimately would like to be. Stay tuned.
For full details, including terms and conditions, visit unlock.com/legal. Call 1-888-780-6854 to speak with a representative today. Actor portrayal. Terms and conditions apply.
Lisa, thanks for having me over. Your new kitchen is gorgeous. How'd you find the money to do it?
We worked with this great company, Unlock. They help you unlock the future value of your home to get the cash you need today.
So it's a home equity loan?
No, it's not a loan at all. There's no monthly payments and no interest charges ever. And you can use the money however you want. We were able to redo our kitchen and pay off our credit card debt.
Wow, Jack and I could really use this to finally pay off our old student loan debt. How do I get started?
It's easy. Just give him a call or go to unlock.com.
Call 1-888-780-6854 to unlock the value in your home and get up to $500,000 in cash with no monthly payments and no interest ever. Use the money for home improvements, to pay off debt, or to add to your retirement fund. It's up to you. Visit unlock.com. That's unlock.com, or call 1-888-780-6854 now to get started.
All right, welcome back. So in this episode, let's just face it, I'm talking about how difficult things are right now and how we can ask ourselves questions to help us navigate these crazy, dysregulating times, these distressing times, these times of great discord, greater than I can ever remember in my lifetime. And not only move through this, but separate, again, the wheat from the chaff, see the truth through the noise, and continue developing in a way that honors us and who we ideally want to be throughout our lifespans. So I'm going to touch on something I said right before the break about how do we know what our values are, but who do they extend to, right? Is it only people like us or people who are not so much like us? And this is going to sound totally out there unless you're a real mushroom fan. There have been some mushroom documentaries, but there's a reason I'm bringing up mushrooms. And mushrooms are these things that we just think of as these isolated little fungi, depending on how you say it, maybe scattered along the forest floor or in the damper corners of your yard or whatever. And something that scientists have learned over the last several years is that these isolated mushrooms have this enormous network the network referring to the mycelium that connects innumerable mushrooms underneath the ground, underneath the earth. And it's actually a way of communicating. There's some research that suggests mushrooms might have like a 50-word vocabulary, the equivalent basically, but they communicate with each other. They are not these separate entities. They are connected. Even some mushrooms that are not the same type of mushroom, there's a whole network. They are all connected, even though on the surface they seem quite distant from each other and different from each other. Same thing with trees, actually, in a forest. That one tree falls down, the other trees know it. And I'm not being metaphorical there. Underneath the earth, there is an incredible web of connection and communication. There's so much life beneath the surface. I'm bringing these two things up because I think they're great metaphors for one way of looking at humanity and really our entire planet. We're all connected, right? The person you love, we're connected. Multiple spiritual traditions have suggested as such. And even if you're not a religious person at all, there's this spiritual idea of we are all connected. So if I know you and I like you, we're connected. I know you and I dislike you, we're still connected. And you're still a potential teacher for me. And I'm a potential teacher for you, right? Even in our discord. Someone halfway around the world who may not share the same language, not share the same cuisine, not look like you, in a way is a reflection of you, and vice versa. We are all connected. Now, if you believe that, and if that's a value, right, does it change how you hear a news report suggesting otherwise? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. When you see something on social media and you're like, how do I know if this is true? I mean, aside from actually looking and seeing, can I verify this is actually accurate information? And how do I know? And am I going to more than one source, which is a good thing to do? When you check your gut and you say, is this aligned with my values and who I am and who I want to be? Especially if I believe that we're all connected, is this aligned with all of that? And if it's not, how do I reevaluate the messenger? Now, that doesn't mean when you're hearing about something that is going on that is completely wrong, that you don't have thoughts and feelings about it, or that you may say, this is not a trustworthy source for me, or I do not feel I can be in communion with or in connection with this person because of this. And that's a valid assessment to have or judgment to make, but it's such a better one when it's informed and not knee-jerk. I already brought up having a person that you admire and knowing what you value about them as a way to get a clearer sense of your own values and who you ideally want to be. If we keep that person in mind, and maybe I'll use my mentor and friend Ronnie for this, but you can use anyone that inspires you. Think of somebody where you would feel like you wanted to be on your best behavior in their presence because their opinion mattered to you. Their opinion of you mattered to you. But think of somebody like that where it's like, oh, this person makes me want to be a better person. And again, sometimes that's a teacher. It might be a teacher from 40 years ago. It might be someone from history that inspired you, a historical figure. But it's good to have that person in mind because my next question for all of us would be, how would I feel if my thoughts and actions were visible to the person I most admire? Basically that the thoughts you have or your intentions or your plans were something that person was privy to. Or, if you're doing something or saying something, would you say it in front of them? Would you be the same way in front of them? Now, you probably know, and you wouldn't need to be a psychologist to know, but each one of us is different in different social contexts. And there's plenty of research to support that. And think about it. When you're with your high school friends and you have one kind of shared context, you may use kind of the language you used when you were in high school. You may crave some of the foods you used to have or the snacks. You may want to do some of the same things or go see a movie from that time period together. Most people have friends who, with certain friends are more likely to swear, and other friends, they're less likely to. You might eat differently or drink differently with different groups of friends. The context, the social context makes a difference. And that's just, we're social animals, but that's part of how we are as social animals. But there might be friends where we tend to, friendships or groups of friends where maybe, some of our own anger or frustration or mean-spiritedness, right? Or some of the things we need to work on come out more with certain people than others. You might notice that with one friend, you might be more likely to get a little petty or a little gossipy than you are with another friend. And you know what? Again, I meant it when I said we're human beings, we're dynamic. It's not like we get to a certain point in our lives and we stay there. It's not like we aren't different on different days. I have to tell you, like, if I'm driving and somebody cuts me off and I have to slam on the brakes and I'm like, my heart's feeling like it's going to beat right out of my chest, I'm going to use some choice language for that person. I'm going to be pissed. And I'm going to think not nice things about them. Who hasn't had that experience? Right? Or if you think somebody is trying to get over on you or be aggressive with you, you're going to have a different reaction than you are with people who are just nice and thoughtful and lovely. You're probably, if you go to church or synagogue or, another house of worship, you're probably different when you're there than you are when you're playing basketball or, again, hanging out, going to grab a cocktail with a friend or whatever. We're different in different contexts. But it's just important to have a sense, a conscious awareness of that ideal goal for ourselves. And again, we're working our whole lives. It's not something where we reach it and we're done. We're not saints. But you might be thinking about, well, what relationships in your life help you to be your definition of a better person, the person you most want to be? And which ones seem to pull you out of feeling like you're on that path? We all have them. Sometimes it's a guilty pleasure to not have to be, A++ all the time. But again, having a larger sense lets you know your values and helps you decide what in your daily life is aligned with those values. I guess a last question is, and this is something that's been around for a while. It's not like I'm not inventing the question, but it's like, okay, if your funeral were tomorrow, who do you imagine would be there? What do you imagine people would remember about you? Is what you imagine reflective of the person you most want to be? Right. And maybe it would be that people would be laughing and joking because they would remember good times with you. It doesn't all have to be serious. Maybe you imagine people standing up and saying, this person really helped me out at this time in my life and it meant something. Or this person was a great mentor, a great friend. This person treated people with respect. Your values help you know the answers to those questions, because if you know the answers, it actually creates a loop in a way, because it helps you to become more of the person you ideally want to be. Think back to the funerals of people you've been to where you've been so moved because you've met people that maybe you didn't know before, and you heard about the very real things that made this person special. And I don't mean just, how people tend to idealize a person once they pass or try to come up with nice things. I mean, really genuine and moving stuff. Like, I remember when this person did this thing that was so inspirational, or when there was this simple act of kindness that they did. Again, knowing the answers to these questions can really help us to live lives that help us to see what's true, make better choices, respect who we are, and weather the times that feel so distressing and uncertain. So that's just kind of what's been on my mind. I'm very curious to hear what you think. As always, I really appreciate the time we spent together, and I truly do wish you all the very best. Until next time, be well.